Hello, everybody. Let's talk about author structural choices and how do they affect overall meaning. So, when we talk about structure, you might think of buildings, you might think of stairs, and that's exactly right. That means the exact same thing. The author makes structural choices, certain steps to get to certain places on purpose. So, let's look at some of the choices that authors make. First things first is problem and solution. That's a structural choice that authors can make. The purpose of this is to state one or more problems and provide one or more solutions to the problem. Some signal words and phrases that you might catch when an author's using this structural choice is problem, solution, dilemma, puzzle, because, question, answer, solved, cause, since, as a result of, in order to, so that, led to, issue, advantage, and disadvantage. This is used to set up suspense for the readers, but also to have some kind of finality and conclusion in a certain spot in the text or at the end. When we're talking about comprehension questions in terms of understanding why an author would have implemented this structural choice, things that we can ask ourselves is what is the problem? Who has the problem? Why is it a problem? What is causing the problem? What solutions have been suggested or tried? What are the pros and cons of various solutions? And which solutions worked or seem to have the best chance for solving the problem? Look at the graphic organizers there. Sometimes you have multiple problems that lead to one solution, or vice versa. You have one problem that can lead to multiple solutions. The author can choose to structure their text however they'd like. But generally, this is more relatable in real life because we all have problems and we're looking for the solutions. Another structural choice that authors make in order to engage the reader is description. The purpose here is to explain a topic, concept, person, place, event, or object by providing characteristics, features, and or giving examples. By how the author describes something, especially by word choice, that will help the reader comprehend more fully how the author feels about or wants the reader to feel about certain characters or things that are happening. Some signal words and phrases for description are any position words, beside, near, in front of, above, along. Words like such as, for instance, appears to be, looks like, most important, features, made up of, in fact, specifically, characteristics, consists of, and for example. Those are all terminologies that are used in order to help us as readers understand the description that the author's giving. Now, remember, these are structural choices for the author themselves. So, how one author describes something may not be the way another does. And that's beautiful because that goes toward the author's voice and the tone of the overall text. Some comprehension question frames here are what is the subject being described? How is the subject being described? Where is it? What it does? How it works? What it looks like? Its classification? And what are the most important attributes or characteristics? When you're looking at graphic organizers, when we're talking about description, these are typical graphic organizers that you'll see when you're analyzing these structural choices that authors make. In the very center, you're going to place whatever's being described. And then on the stems outward, you're going to talk about how the author chose to describe it. And that's going to impact the overall text because, again, it will speak to the author's tone and overall feelings and impressions about whatever's being described. Comparing and contrasting. This is another structural choice that authors make. The purpose here is to describe what's similar and or different about two or more objects. We've been using these Venn diagrams for many years throughout your schooling, I'm sure. So you're really familiar with compare and contrast. So I'm just going to pick out some key signal words and phrases here. Both, also, alike, however, compared to, in contrast, on the other hand, and on the contrary. Here, the author is choosing to look at similarities and differences. That choice in structure impacts the overall text because the author is not choosing simply to focus on similarities or differences. Instead, they are specifically choosing to look at both. So, why do you think that might be? Well, some questions we can ask ourselves are: what are the subjects being compared to? What is it about them that's being compared? What characteristics are the subjects from the basis of the comparison? What characteristics do they have in common? How are they alike? And in what ways are they different? If the author's pointing out certain similarities, then you can make an assumption or an inference that the author wants you to see those as similarities for a reason. How do these similarities and differences in the compare and contrast that the author's pointing out, how does that impact the overall text in the way that you as a reader are meant to see it? These are some common graphic organizers. The circles are the Venn diagram that I just discussed. And there's another graphic organizer that's used for compare and contrast in terms of the larger bar graph on the top, and then speaking of things that are alike or similarities or differences on the other side. Let's talk about another author's choice that impacts overall meaning of text: chronology and sequence. So this means how things go in order. So the purpose is to provide information in time order or in the order in which events, actions, or steps in a process occur. Some signal words and phrases that you might see here are first, second, third, before, now, after, following, prior to, simultaneously. Those are all signal words that the author has made this structural choice to use chronology and sequence. Some comprehension questions that we can ask ourselves are: what sequence of events is being described? What are the major events or incidents that occur? What happens first, next, and last? How is the sequence or cycle revealed in the text? What are the steps, directions, procedures to follow to make or do something? When we look at the author's structural choice here, is the author giving us everything in sequential order? Or are things specifically left out? That could impact the overall text. When we talk about graphic organizers, we generally have steps here when we're talking about chronological order. You're going to see things like and then, secondly, thirdly, because they're going in some sort of order. So graphically, it makes sense to have some kind of steps. Another structural choice that impacts overall text meaning by authors is cause and effect. The purpose is to explain why or how something happened or happens. The effect is what happened, the cause is why it happened. So, some signal words that you might encounter when you're looking at cause and effect is because, therefore, as a result, is caused by, consequentially, due to, on account of, outcome, and impact. Those are just some of them. But when you think about why the author structurally chose to talk about the cause and effect, what is the author saying about the effect due to the cause? Some questions you can ask yourself are: what were the specific events that happened? Why did the events happen? What were the causes? What were the results or outcomes of these events happening? What was the effect? Did prior events cause or influence the main effect? And if so, in what ways? What is the significance of the event and or results or the outcomes? That one is going to be huge when you're analyzing author's choice. The author chose to specifically structure their text, including cause and effect. Why? How did it impact the overall meaning of the text? Those are the questions that we're going to ask ourselves. But more importantly, once you come to an answer, you have to be able to support yourself with textual evidence, just like when we were making inference. Let's look at the graphic organizers here. In the one on the left, you look at three causes leading to one event, and in turn, leading to three effects. But on the right, you have one cause and three different effects. There are many ways that you can graphically organize cause and effect, and these are just some of them. When we talk about author's choice, again, the structural choices that they make and how it impacts the text overall is all up to you to analyze and dig a little deeper and say, I can identify this as a structural choice that the author made, and this is what I believe the impact on the text was because. So you first need to identify of these structural choices, which did the author implement? In many texts, they choose to implement a multitude or many of these structural choices. But then it's all up to you to decide how that impacted the text overall. And be sure to defend your answers. You always need textual support. You got this, guys. Good luck on the quiz.